Welcome everyone. Yeah, we'll be starting in about 5 minutes, so grab a coffee and we'll be back soon. Welcome everyone to the webinar today. Can everyone hear me? If you could just yell out if you can. Beautiful, thanks Grant. So yeah, welcome everyone today. What we're going to do today is run through deploying 3CX from the basic install on the cloud and then getting the system configured. So getting the phones registered, getting all the groups, the contacts, the SIP trunking, outbound rules, IVRs and ring groups, setting up faxing, and just getting all the features done so that you feel confident deploying the system. So what I've done today is I've spun up a Google Cloud Platform 3CX install just using the PBX Express tool. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the PBX Express tool, it's just at pbxexpress.3cx.com, and that'll guide you through setting up the system from scratch. Just a reminder to everyone as well that 3CX 16 simultaneous calls standard edition is now free for the first year. So if you've got customers who need a system set up, you can set them up on 16 standard straight from here. The other option is once that 12 months is up, it will revert back to a 4 simultaneous call standard. So that's now free. So the differences between standard and pro, you can find here. Just Google standard versus pro for 3CX. You'll find the edition comparison here. So most of you can get away with standard if you read through the specs here. The only real differences between the two are the call center and contact center functionality. So setting up the call flow designer, advanced ring strategies, syncing with LDAP, so with the Active Directory environment, the wallboard. A lot of you don't need that. So great way to get started with 3CX for free and make some more margin just by setting up the standard edition. So I've set this system up in the cloud, and it's completely scratch, except for one extension I've registered. So this is how 3CX will look as soon as you set it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through how I set it up and how you can go through step by step to get the best results. The first thing I always do is I go into the IP blacklist section here. So if you open that up here, you'll see here the web meeting servers for 3CX have been whitelisted. This is like an anti-hacking module that 3CX have got built in. So anyone who try and brute force or to get into your system will be blocked after a certain amount of attempts. The best way so you don't get locked out yourself is to whitelist your own IP address. That's especially important if you're deploying on the cloud, because you will lock yourself out. So I'll put in here, what is my IP? I'll grab our public IP here in Melbourne, and I'll put that back into 3CX. So I'll click add. I want to add a single IP address. Now, if you were deploying this on a local area network, say an on-prem system on a NUC or on Hyper-V VMware, then whitelist the entire local subnet. So if you pick here, you want to do a range of IP addresses, you can put in here 192.168.1.0 and with the correct subnet mask for your network config, and you can see there that none of the local IPs then will get blocked. Change the action to allow and just put in here local LAN, and then you're safe. The worst thing is when you get locked out trying to jump on another computer or from another IP that hasn't been blacklisted. It's really annoying. So in this instance, we'll whitelist my WAN IP. So single IP address, we'll punch in my WAN IP, we'll click in allow leader Melbourne WAN IP and click OK. Now I can't be locked out of the system. So if you forget the password or you try too many times, it's one of the worst things. Second thing that I always do is I go and set the automatic backups up. So if you're playing around with configurations, you may make a mistake or you delete something that you shouldn't have. This is a good way to revert the system back. So if you click enable scheduled backup, there's a few options here. So the full system config, so all the settings for the extensions, groups, contacts, etc. Your license information, which we're going to back up, your call logs and chats. Now, you might not want to back up system voice prompts, your custom templates, voicemails, recordings, because it's just going to make the file size a lot larger. So you might want to do that if you're doing call recording and you want to back up to a NAS or somewhere like that and it's local, then you can do that. But otherwise, we'll just do a very basic system backup. and we'll do it every day, and we'll do it at 3 a.m. This is 24-hour time. And we'll configure the backup rotation to a 7-day rotation. So that will keep one backup and it'll keep overriding it after 7 days. So you'll have a Monday to Monday backup, and then once the next week ticks over, it'll start overriding those backups. Go back to the dashboard. The next thing I always set up is the updates, okay? So you've got two options here. You can set it so that it automatically updates the system, or you might want to go through and do those manually. Now, if there's updates in terms of security updates, firmware updates for phones, etc., I typically like it updating by itself. Some people out there, you know, have been burnt with Microsoft updates and don't like the system doing it by itself. So it's entirely up to you. Just make sure your backups aren't occurring at the same time your updates and backups aren't on the same sort of time, if that makes sense. So, you know, you might, in this instance, we might update at midnight and then we'll back up at 3 a.m. Just be careful when you set this up out of the box. The time you install the system, it will automatically update at that time. So if that's during the day, like during business hours, that the last thing you want is that system updating. So please make sure that time is suitable for whatever region you're in. Okay, so back at the dashboard, we've got our system nearly set up, ready to go. The next thing I do now is I go over to the extensions. This is where you'll get everyone registered in the company. You'll have add all their details in, and you'll see here that I've out of the box, this system gives an extension 000. Now, obviously in Australia, that's the same as our emergency services number. So the worst thing would be for someone to call 000 and it rings me, because I'm not going to be very helpful. So if you click on that and you try and delete it, it won't let you, because that's the operator extension. So it says 000 cannot be deleted. If you do this, if you go down to settings and then you go into the parameters for the system, so the cogwheel here, that'll load up all the parameters, and it says at the top here, advanced users only. What we'll do is we'll search for 000, and that'll come up here. So it'll say operator. It's telling me the operator's extension number is 000. If I double click on that and I change that to extension, say 100, once I go back into extensions, I'll be able to delete that extension out of there, okay? And then I'll be able to create my new operator extension. So I'll put extension 100, system operator, and that solved that problem. Okay, got a question from Philip. Is our public WAN IP is not static? How to whitelist? Any suggestions? If you haven't got a static IP, then you're probably going to struggle in terms of whitelisting your IP address. Saying that, you might not have the problem with being blacklisted, because obviously your IP changes. So depending on how often it changes, 99% of people have a static IP now. So if you're on a 4G connection or you're behind some other NAT, then obviously you won't. But yeah, there's no dynamic DNS or anything to that effect that you can do. All right, so you can see here that I've fixed the 000 problem, okay, and that looks all good. The next thing I'm going to do is start setting up users. So I'll go through now and we'll put some extensions in. So I'll put my next extension as 102, and I'll put in here test extension. Now, for the purpose of the webinar, I've set up a Gmail account so we can see how the users actually get emailed. So when you're deploying, you'll know what email they get and how to guide them through on the phone if they get stuck setting the system up. So for this test extension, I've made an email address called PBX demo, this one here. I'll grab that and I'll press OK. So what that'll do now is it'll set that user up in the system, and then it'll email them with their details. So if I go back to Gmail, see if that's come through yet. This is the email your user will get. So if you're deploying a system, be mindful that the user will start to get these emails. So hi test So whatever the person's name is, so for instance, you know, you might have Betty Jones or whatever, that'll come up here in the list. Now, everything in here that the user needs to know is there. So their extension number, their voicemail PIN, how to get into their voicemail, and then using the web client. So the web client part, a lot of people ring me and ask me, how do I set the iPhone up? I'll go through that in a minute. And is everyone there now? I think there's a problem with the headset. So yeah, cool, great. So this is everything the user needs to know. So all right, beautiful. So I'll go back to the system and I'll run through now connecting a phone to these extensions. So there's a few tricks to this. If you go into the test extension here, you'll see there's a whole heap of other fields down here. These can be left alone at the moment. The critical one is the phone provisioning tab. So I'll go into there. Now I've plugged in some phones. I've plugged in a T56A and a T46S. So two of the Yealink handsets. Now, if you're configuring them on the cloud, you'll need to actually log into the phone and drop the provisioning URL in. That's the safest way I find to provision the handsets. So I'll log into this phone. Here's the T46S. So just admin and admin for the default credentials. Now, the most important thing you'll need out of here is the MAC address. So I got the IP or the local IP of the phone from our local DHCP server, and then on the phone I can go into the settings and I can actually see the IP address that the DHCP server is assigned to it, and that's how I found out how to get into the phone. The MAC address here, I'll copy that to the clipboard, and then I'll go back into 3CX, okay, and I'll click Add a Phone. This is a Yealink T46S, so I'll type in Y for Yealink and go to the T46S, drop the MAC address in, hit OK. All right, so it's dropped the MAC in, it's giving me a provisioning link. Now, this is the part that you need to be a little bit cautious of. Under the provisioning method here, there's three methods. So if you're provisioning it on-prem and it was a local 3CX server, so it was on the same local subnet as the phones, leave it on local LAN. 3CX SBC or Session Border Controller is some additional software you can install on either Hyper-V, VMware, a Raspberry Pi system that acts as a gateway between or a border between the phones and the system. So it'll create a tunnel from the local network, like a VPN, back up into the cloud. For this instance here, we're going to use direct SIP or stun. 90% of you will use that. The only time you'd ever use the SBC is if you had a lot of phones behind a NAT. For instance, you're doing a deployment of, say, 10 offices, and you're putting the system in the cloud, and some of the offices had 30, 40, 50 handsets. You can sometimes run out of, you can run into issues with the NAT table on the router. So by putting it behind an SBC, it gives you visibility from the cloud of the phones, and it gives you that single tunneling via the 5090 port back to the 3CX box. So in this case, we'll use direct SIP. And you'll see here it'll change to the fully qualified domain name. So in this instance, I've got pbxdemo.3cx.com.au. So I'll grab that and I'll click copy. And I'll go back up to the phone, go to settings, go to auto provision, and then I'll paste it in, okay? Then I can go to auto provision now. Before you do that, make sure that you go back into the phone and go to options, and that you untick this box, disallow use outside of the LAN. Now, because we're doing a cloud deployment, you need to be cautious that you untick that box. If you're doing it on-prem and all the phones are within the corporate network, then you don't need to untick that unless they're going to be used outside the office. 9 times out of 10, you will need to untick this if you've got users that want to use the web client, or they want to use the iOS or Android over 4G to use their Office phone. That'll need to be unticked. So best unticked. Okay, so I'll click OK. I'll go back to my Yealink phone. So I've just put the server URL in, no username or password required. Auto provision now. And then it'll update the config on the phone. And it takes about 2 or 3 minutes. The phone will power cycle. It'll boot up. It'll talk back to the 3CX server, grab the config, and then provision the phone. The best way to know whether that's happened or not is this will go green, okay, to say it's registered, and the phone will appear in this list here. While we're waiting for that to happen, a lot of people ask me about setting up keys on the phone, transferring numbers, parking calls, etc. So I'll show you guys how to set up the BLF buttons. Question from Gary, would DHCP option 66 work for this setup? Yes, it does. So there's 2 options with that. DHCP options can actually hand out the provisioning URL. That's one option. The second option is we do have access to the Yealink provisioning system. So if you want us to drop ship handsets to your customers and they don't have a DHCP server you can configure, or they're in a satellite office, etc., we can actually get all the MAC addresses of the phones, drop ship them to your customer. Your customer just plugs them in and they'll be configured. So how that works, and I'll just explain it here. The MAC address of the phone, okay, we enter into the Yealink provisioning system. You enter that MAC into 3CX, okay, and then leader drop ship to your customer, okay. So that's kind of the workflow. So if you want to get that done, let me know. I can give you access to the Yealink provisioning system, and I can work with your local tech room to make sure that they're scanned in and all configured before they're dropped out. So if you've got a bigger deal that you don't want to have to go out on site, or you can't go out on site, let me know and we can implement this. This is at no charge as well. So it's provided by Yealink. If I go back to my extensions now, I'm still not registered, so I'll wait for that to come up. If I go now into sort of configuring extensions and going through all the different options here, if you enter the mobile number in here, that will show up in the 3CX contact book. So if you go here, like on my system here, you can see other staff members' mobile numbers. The outbound caller ID, depending on your SIP provider, so hopefully you're using Breeze Connect, but if you're not, some providers don't support caller ID overstamping here. So you just need to be certain that you can actually use that. The next thing I do for all extensions is I generally disable the voicemail pin. A lot of people will ring you, especially customers who aren't too sure or haven't looked through this email and notice their pin is 4581. They'll be confused. So that's best if it's a small environment where no one's going to pick up the phone and listen to the voicemails. Turn it off. The other thing that could be handy is if you want to get the voicemails as an email attachment. So there's a few options. It can send you a notification to say, hey, you've got a voicemail, ring 999 on your phone and listen to it. It can send it as an attachment, okay? And it can also send it as an attachment and delete it from your voicemail. So if you just want it as an attachment, if you're running Office 365 or something to the like where you got that real-time mail, then setting as an attachment is probably an easier way to do it rather than accessing it from your phone. In this instance, I've disabled the PIN. Now, the greetings are for the voicemail. They can be configured via the 3CX console here. So you can click record from phone, okay? And then you can pick, say, test extension. What this does is it rings the extension, prompts you to record a greeting, and then you can basically go back in then and give it a name. So I can click here, my greeting, click OK, and that will now call extension 102, which I can hear ringing in the background, and I can actually record the greeting. So, thanks for calling Ty, please leave a message and I'll get back to you. Press hash at the end, and then that'll be the greeting for the phone. It's same as Telstra voicemail as well. So if you call 999, you'll actually get prompt through the process as well. So you can do it either way. Next option here, by default, after 20 seconds, the call will go to voicemail. Okay, you can actually change that for internal or external calls. You can have different flows. So, you know, if it's an internal call, you may want it to go to your mobile. So if someone's trying to buzz you internally, the after hours, it can go to your mobile. Okay, you can make it go to another number, so a colleague. External calls, you can, you know, obviously the same thing. If you're on leave or on holidays, you can make it do different things. 3CX does support ringing your mobile phone, like the actual phones, at the same time as your desk phone, depending on whether you're using the app or not. So if you don't want to use the app, the 3CX app, which we'll go through in a minute, and you just want to use the your mobile phone, you've got an unlimited data plan or an unlimited voice plan, then that might be another option as well. Now, if you scroll down, there's different profiles that are available in 15.5. So you can actually set the phone to do different things during specific office hours. So I'll show you the office hours shortly and how to set those greetings for customers if they want, you know, holiday messages, you know, Anzac Day, you know, Christmas break, whatnot. And again, there are exceptions. So for certain caller IDs, you can set a rule, you know, if the boss is calling, to never go to voicemail or whatnot. So by adding these rules in here, calls from a caller ID received during all hours, you can have it doing different things. Back up here, we've got the phone provision like we did before. So I'll see if it's come up in the list. Okay, so it has. Okay, so we can see the extension here. It's all good. It's not in red like the one above. Okay. Now the phone above that I provisioned earlier, so that T54S, you can see here that it's saying it's not supported, the firmware version, and you won't be able to do a lot with that phone. 3CX has some minimum firmware requirements with the phones. So if you're grabbing something out of a box that, you know, especially the T46s or the older handsets, they may be sitting, you know, in the warehouse at Yealink for 3 or 4 months, and there'll be like a few firmware revisions behind. All the firmware is available at yealink.com. So if you download the firmware files and update the phone, then you can make sure it's 100% compatible. A lot of the time, if the firmware is not up to date, you'll get silly things happening, like the phone will keep ringing after you answer, some of the buttons won't work, or the call quality may be an issue. So having the right firmware so the system can recognize the phone is really important. Once the phone and the system are linked together, the firmware updates from that point will come via the auto updating up here. So they'll be downloaded each time. So we can see our systems registered, our phones are registered here. Okay. The next thing we'll do is we'll put some buttons on the phone. So I typically provision the phones so they're like an old Commander phone system. So everyone knows how to put a call on hold, go over somewhere else and pick it up. So it's got to be really easy. Otherwise, if people are trying to transfer calls with, you know, star codes or, you know, all that kind of jazz, it can be very confusing. If you pick up here, what I generally do is I set the first 2 buttons on every phone as shared parking lots, okay? So you'll have here shared park 1 and shared park 2. So how a shared park works is if you, say for instance, I'm on the phone now, I want to buzz someone in the Adelaide office, I'll press park 1, okay, on my handset, and that light will go red on my Yealink phone. Then I can buzz the person up in Adelaide. I can say, hey, John's on the phone on park 0. He was ringing up about some 3CX bits and pieces. Can you grab the call? That person can then pick up that park without me having to transfer the call or potentially lose the customer. So it's a really good way of making sure that, you know, the call goes through and gets transferred properly. You can do a blind transfer to someone, so where you just transfer it through by hitting their button or transferring to their extension, but I find the shared parking is the most fail-safe way of doing it. You'll see here, there's another option called BLF. A busy lamp field shows you who's on the phone. So you'll be able to see who's on the phone, whether they're either red or green. So red meaning they're on a call or green meaning they're available. So what I'll do in a small office, let's say we've got 4 or 5 phones in this office, I'll set up a BLF key for everyone. So if you need to transfer a call or call someone, you can just hit their extension and it'll ring it straight away. The trap with this is that some people go, I can't transfer calls, I can't put anyone on park. So out of the box, 3CX has a thing called groups, okay? So everyone is in the default group here.
If you open this up, and I've had a few questions last week about it, and have a look at group rights, you'll see here that people who are a manager, these are some of the roles they've got. So they can see other members in the group, they can see group calls, see presence. You can pretty much see they can do everything, okay? Standard users can't do much. So they can't divert, transfer, or pick up, okay? They can't park calls. So tick these two boxes so then you won't get into trouble. That person now can actually use the buttons on their phone to park the call. They can divert calls, transfer, and they can pick up. So if you don't tick those boxes, those buttons on your phone won't work. So if you're wondering why they're not, check in there. That's the best way to go. All right, so we've got our extension set up. We've got demo phone and test extension. They're both registered. The next thing now, a lot of people ask is, getting a SIP trunk set up and getting the call flow working properly. Okay. If I go into SIP trunks here and I click on add a SIP trunk, I'm going to pick Australia and I'm going to pick Breeze Connect from the list. Breeze Connect will be on every 3CX system as of Monday next week. It'll be automatically downloaded, the template, and it'll be ready for you to use straight away. In the meantime, you do need to go via the support page on 3CX. And if you're running Windows, you need to dump the files in this zip template here I've created into this directory for Windows. If you're running it on the cloud or you're running it on Linux, you'll need to navigate to that path and run these commands to download the templates. As of Monday, 3CX is fully certified for the Breeze Connect product and will be available automatically in the template list. So you'll see an update up the top here, and you'll be able to download the Breeze Connect template. So that'll remove that complexity of that step. So I'll add a trunk in now, and I'll go back into my Breeze Connect portal, okay? And I will add a trunk in. So I'll go up to here, add a new trunk, and I'm going to add someone on here. I'm going to put someone on a 2-line plan for Victoria. Okay, I'm going to put it under test user. I'm going to assign them a phone number. Okay, click add. All right, awesome. So I've set up here a single DID. So I'll copy that onto my clipboard. I'll go back into 3CX, pick the country, pick the provider. I'll paste the main number in. Question from Grant, can we add our own DID? Yeah, I'll show you that in a tick. If we were porting the customer and you wanted to add in another number to overstamp, okay, you can do that as well. So I'll show you how to do it in the tick. So we'll click OK here. Now, the only two other things you need to fill in here are the authentication ID and the password. So if you go back to the Breeze Connect portal, you'll see that's the authentication ID, the trunk ID. I'll copy that. I'll go back to Auth ID, paste it in. I'll go back to Breeze Connect, grab the password, copy, and I'll paste that in there. So all I need to do now is press OK, and that trunk's registered. Now, a lot of you ring me and ask about codec selection. So what's the best codec to use, and how do you know what codec you are using? So if you go into the Breeze Connect trunk here, there's a whole heap of options at the top, okay? DIDs, so these are the DIDs that we've added to the trunk that this trunk needs to respond to. So, for instance, if your customer had a requirement for another DID, that you would assign multiple numbers and you'd add the sub-DIDs or the other DIDs, say, number ending in 7927, 7928, you would add them into the list here so the system knows that they're recognized by that trunk. If I go to options here, you'll see that the codec that it wants to use is G729. A lot of people sort of say that sounds really tinny or it sounds echoey, it sounds like the person's not real at the other end. And that's because that codec uses a high level of compression. So when you're using compression, it comes at a cost, and the cost is quality. So the best way to avoid that problem is to use G711A or A-Law, okay? So A-Law is ISDN quality audio. It requires about 100 kilobytes a second for it to work. A little bit less, but that's a rough guide, okay? If you've got customers on wireless like Unity Wireless, or you've got them on a fixed wireless service, sometimes you do need to revert back to G729, simply because the latency or the traffic that it can handle is not working properly. You might have call clipping or silence. It can be a lot of different problems. So move to 729 if you're not happy with your call quality. But I generally recommend using ALAW, ULAW, then 729. So G711U is the American-based codec, because they have to have everything different. But in Australia, we use ALAW. Let it go to ULAW and then 729 in that order. So I'll go back up here and pick OK. So we've basically said now we've got a trunk with one DID number. We've used 711A, so ALAW. The second place you can set the codec is in the extensions. So if you go over to extensions here and you go into the test extension, you'll see that it's got the same options. Pick the right spot under phone provisioning. You'll see here that it's got the same options. You've got ULAW, ALAW, so that is 711A or PCMA. So this phone's going to use UA722, which is a wideband, not so supported codec, and 729. So what I do is I could change this order up, and I move A up here, because if you're using PCMA or 711A on the trunk, it's nice to use the same codec on the phone, so the system doesn't have to re-encode any of the audio. So we'll click OK up here. All right, beauty. So we've got a trunk set up. We've got a few people registered. Now, a lot of people ask me about what's the best strategy in terms of having inbound calls. How should they work? So you've got a few options. You can have either an IVR or a digital receptionist, where you'll have press 1 for sales, 2 for support, or 3 for anything else. You can have a ring group that will ring multiple people, or you can have queues, okay? So I'll explain the difference first between groups and queues, because I think that's pretty important. When you ring up and a queue answers the call, a queue puts the user immediately on hold, and then it'll start either ringing certain extensions in the queue strategy that you've chosen. So I'll set up a queue first, and we'll go through that. So I'll click up here and I'll go add, and I'll call this one sales queue. So sales queue here, it'll give it an extension number, and then it'll ask me for the polling strategy. So the polling strategy works like this. A prioritized hunt will ring the phones in order according to how we select the agents here. So if we put, say, reception, user 1, user 2, user 3, it will go through and it'll ring those extensions in that order. Ring all is your standard ring all, like everyone's probably used to. It'll ring all the extensions at the same time. Random hunt will randomly select one of the callers. Round robin will keep going around in circles. Longest waiting, least talk time, pretty self-explanatory. Fewest answer calls, so the least agent that's been working the least. And then it goes on and on. The best way to decide on the strategy, go to the 3CX website, have a look at all of those. The probably only two that you'll use for a basic setup will be the prioritized hunt and ring all, okay? So we'll do a ring all here, and that's how long it's gonna ring for, okay, 30 seconds. Now, if no one answers the queue, okay, after 3 minutes, which is 1800 seconds, okay, it will ask you a few things. So it will ask you, do you want to end the call? Or so that's 10 minutes, I should lie. Sorry, 30 minutes. If you go to connect to extension, voicemail box, go to another queue, etc. So you can pick what it does here, okay? So for instance, if no one answers this queue after the allotted time, what do you want it to do? Do you want it to leave a message? Do you want it to go to another group? Do you want it to go to a mobile number? You can pick what it does here, okay? The music on holds, this is what the people are going to hear while they're waiting in the queue. When you call up and a SIP trunk goes to a queue, the user won't get any ringing, so it'll go directly to music. Now, a lot of people call me and they want some ringing, okay? If you need ringing at the start, if your customer is just adamant that it has to ring, in the intro prompt here, you can just record some ringing noises and put it in there. So you can download that off the internet. If anyone needs it, I've got the Australian ring prompt I can send over to you, and you can put it in here. I've had a few people ask about it and they didn't like it, or customers were confused by just getting music or just getting a welcome greeting. It's completely up to you what you do there, okay? The next thing it can do is it can announce the position to the caller in the queue. So if you've got, you know, 3 agents or agents signed in, they're both on the phone and they're the person's 10th in the queue, you can keep announcing every minute, 2 minutes, whatever you want to choose, where they are in the queue, okay? To add your agents in, we'll click here and we'll add in everyone. So I just click on them like you do multi-selecting, okay? Then everyone will be in the call queue. If I click OK here, now the agents won't work yet because they haven't been signed into the queue. So you need to make sure that when you go to your extensions here, it's a bit of a trick. You click status and you'll see here that I'm logged out of the queue. Unless you're actually logged into the queue won't work. So you need to make sure that the agents are signed in or out. Now they can sign in or out via the 3CX web client or via the management console here. So you've got a choice. Okay, so I'll log those in. Ring groups here. Ring groups are your standard ring group like any phone system has. So you might have here inbound calls. You'll have your group members, so who's in the queue, or in the ring group, I should say. Okay, if no one answers, go to voicemail or do what it needs to do. So you can pick here. The IVR, or the digital receptionist, if I click on that, and I click on add, this is your press 1, press 2, press 3. So welcome IVR. You might have an option here to say, you know, thank you for calling Bob's Clothing. You know, press 1 for sales, 2 for support. Okay, if you want to record the message like what I showed you guys before, click on the record button, pick the extension you're sitting at, okay, call it welcome IVR.wave, okay, and then it'll call the extension and you can record that greeting, okay. If you want to do it in Audacity or in another program, you do need to make sure that you export it as PCM, okay, as 8 kilohertz, okay, 16-bit in mono, okay, and maximum size can be 100 meg. So just make sure that you do that. Question from Grant, is there Australian prompts? I do have the Australian prompt set, so you can upload those and it will get rid of the UK or American accent, so that's no problems. The next thing we need to do is we need to go back to our SIP trunks, and now we can decide where our calls are going to go. So you can see here for the main trunk number, we can see during office hours, where do you want that call to go? So in this instance, we can say, right, send to extension, and you'll see all of the call queue we've set up, the sales queue, or the IVR. So you can pick from one of those 3, okay? Outside of office hours, you get another option. So after 5 o'clock, after 6 o'clock, you can make it do something else. So for those in the service industry that have to provide after hours support, you might want it to go to a IVR that says press 1 for emergency after hours, and then it will transfer to that. To set your office hours, if you go into settings, okay, and then you go across to time zone, office and holidays, this is where you can set your time zone that your phone system's sitting in. So in this instance, we'll pick Melbourne, so +10, and we'll configure our office hours. So Monday, we'll configure from 8 till 5, press OK. Anything outside those hours, it will use the out of office scenario in the trunk. For holidays, for instance, if you've got you know, Australia Day or, you know, Anzac Day, you can record custom greetings for those particular days, and you can set particular times that you're going to be trading. So for customers that are only operating, you know, maybe half a day on a public holiday, or only have after hours or emergency support, they can record a custom greeting for their customers, and they can repeat that every year, so they don't have to keep reinventing the wheel each time those days occur. So we've pretty much now covered adding a phone, getting the extensions set up with the handsets. Okay, we've added the SIP trunk in, and now we try and make calls. They won't work. The next thing we need to make sure we do is set up some outbound rules. So by default, no outbound rules are created when you set up a trunk. So we need to tell the system if someone's calling an outside number, or they're calling a a mobile 131300, what to do with the calls. All of these rules are on the Breeze Connect website. So if you go over to the support tab, so partner and then support, you'll see here that it's got 3CX outbound call rules. If you click on that, download the call rules, that's a PDF document, that'll guide you through setting all these up. So I'll just do one or two now. I won't go through and bore you with those. So we'll do one for 000 calls. Calls starting with a prefix of 000, okay, with a length of, we'll leave that blank. From extension groups, we'll pick default. Now, this is the important part. If I had left that blank, there's not enough information there for that call rule to work. So you need to either have, the default extension group in there, otherwise it won't pick up that rule. We're going to route the calls via Breeze Connect, okay? And then I'll press OK. So go through and follow what I've done in this PDF document up here, and follow them through for each of the rules. So based on whatever state you're in, I've got all of the settings here for you. It takes about 5 minutes to do. All right, so we've covered now we can make an outbound call. We've covered how our inbound rules are going to, or our inbound calls are going to be routed. The next thing that a lot of people ask about is setting up the phone or setting up the 3CX app and getting the mobile phone set up with the QR code. So I'll run through that now. If we go over to the Gmail account that I set up earlier, and we can see here that the user has been emailed here with their extension, using the web client and installing their soft phone. So what I'll do now is I'll open up the web client. I'll open it up in a new tab. You'll notice that the web client URL and the management URL are different. So like I said earlier, whitelist your IP address so you don't accidentally try and log in with the admin credentials here and do it 5 or 6 times and then lock yourself out or get yourself blacklisted, which can easily happen if you're not aware that you're on the web client URL instead. So we'll go back to here. We'll log in with the extension number, which is 102, and with the password I've got here. So we'll go 102. Okay, we'll click paste. Now, if someone wants to register and try out their phone, what I'll do, I'll show you how the QR code works. So if you go up to here, okay, and then you click on scan QR code, once you download the 3CX app on your mobile device, so either Android or iPhone, you then scan this code. It'll prompt you to scan it. Once you scan it, your system or your phone will reboot, or not, the app will reboot, and your phone will be provisioned. Once that's provisioned, all of your calls can be answered via the app straight away. You'll see in here that I can see the presence of other extensions. I'll be able to see all my company contacts, my personal contacts in here that I can add, my call history, chat, conferencing. Everything unique to the user or getting the user experience working is via here. So obviously users don't access the management console. They just access the 3CX web client through here. So all the functionality here can be accessed to via the 3CX app on your computer, which I've got open here, which is my desk phone at work, or you can access it on your mobile. So depending on what you want to do. I showed the queues earlier, how to sign in and out of the queues. You'll see here I can toggle my queue status here. So if you've got users that are coming in and out of the organization, or aren't there all the time to answer the sales calls, they can just sign out of the queue simply by using up there. No, it's pretty straightforward. All right, so I'll go back to the phone system now, and we can have a look at faxing. So a lot of people here are sort of unsure about how the faxing works. If I go to the fax extensions here, and I click on add, I can set it up so that 3CX phone system will receive faxes and send them to email. So you can go through here and you can set it up so that the fax will transform or go through to an email in the office. All the fax server settings are here, okay? So the default email address that it goes to, okay? And how it all works. So if you need help setting up a fax, give me a buzz, or I can shoot you across to the right support material there. It's kind of becoming obsolete, but a lot of people, especially in finance and banking, still rely on fax. The other thing we get asked a lot is, how do I set up a cordless phone? So the W60 phone, the Yealink, you'll see on the dealer shop. So I'll go here. I'll just run through how that works and how to set those up. So if you have a look back in 3CX here, you'll notice under extensions or under phones, and I click add phone here, I go to Yealink, there's no cordless phones here, and you'll wonder, how am I going to set this phone up? The way the cordlesses work is this. If you go back across to the left-hand side to the FXS or DECT phones, okay, and click on add, you'll then get the option between Gigaset, Pattern, Snom, Welltec, and Yealink. So we sell all the Yealink phones. So the Yealink W52, which is now end of life, the W56, which is the older base, and the new W60. So the W60, if you have a look on the dealer shop here, W60, that's the new cordless with base. So if you have a look at that, it includes the smaller form factor base with the handset. The handset is the same as the W56. So if you want to order additional handsets, just search for the SKU W56, and you'll find that now on the dealer shop. That's the W56H, which is all the additional handsets. The W60 base can support up to 8 handsets now. So that's great if you've got, say, doing a nursing home or other deployment, go for that. So I'll put in the W60B, which is the base, okay, and I'll put a MAC address in. Yeah. All right. Again, it's the same as provisioning a handset like we did earlier. So you can pick your provisioning method. So we're going to use stun in this instance, and then we just paste that link into the base. So the base GUI looks exactly the same as the handset. So if you log in here, if I log into the right phone, it'd be good. And I go settings, auto provision. So in the instance of a base, you'd paste that into the base. I'll go up here. Okay, and you click OK. What happens now is all your extensions now are defined here. So you can have extension 1, 2, and 3, and they will be the handsets that link in with the base. So you can see here that there's eight extensions that are compatible with that base. So the base is provisioned, and then the handsets connect to the base. Again, codec selection, by default, it's on you. Move it up to A to match the other phones in the system, and then just click OK. Now you've registered the base. All of your handsets will be auto-provisioned. The base does reboot, and you will need to link the additional handsets to the base, just like you do with a standard cordless system. We'll go through some other options here now. So we've covered the call parking. We've covered some other bits and pieces regarding the fax. The other option here is the music on hold. A lot of people ask about this. We'll go into there now. So in the older versions of 3CX, you could only have one music on hold file, and it would play from the start every time. So for instance, if I answered a call and I put it back on park or on hold, the person would get all the messages or all the music back from the start again, which is really annoying. You can now randomize the playback. So you can randomize it per call, or you can randomize it per day. And you've got here all the different music files. Again, they need to be in the correct format. To get them into that format, download Audacity. That's the best way to go. It's a free open source music platform that you can change the audio files into the correct format. So export it as a WAV file, and then you can upload it back into 3CX. It does not work with MP3s, so make sure that you have got that covered. Grant, how to add another SIP device, either a pager or a door phone? Okay, cool. So if you've got a device that isn't supported by 3CX, what you can do instead is if you go into the extensions here, you can actually add the phone in this way. So if you click add, okay, you'll see here it'll have all the different devices. You can add in your own template. Now, I'm pretty sure there's a generic device in here. Most of the intercoms are in here now. What you can do, though, if you go down here and you pick on your, say, 3CX client, you'll have options in regard to the, look here, in regard to the device with the password. So you'll have the, let me have a look here. It's on this page. See the authentication. So the authentication ID, you can use that to put into other devices. So if you've got a paging system, I did one the other day with a Ubiquiti Unify EDU system. So they were running the Unify controller, and they wanted to register the 3CX system to the Unify controller so that they could then, press 101 or 103 on their phones. The ATA or the Unify controller would answer, and then they could do a broadcast over the EDU access points. So you can just use the credentials in here and then register at PBX. So the server URL would be pbxdemo.3cx.com.au on port 5060. So that's how you get around that issue. You can yourself create custom templates if you want to maybe modify the way that the Yealink template works or the way that it handles certain things. The templates can be all managed in here. So you will find online that there are some non-official 3CX templates that you can find, XML templates. You can upload those just like you do with the provider templates, and you can upload them into the system and get some additional functionality. Just note that it won't be supported by 3CX. So if you have a support issue, then you'll need to handle it yourself. The other thing that 3CX are doing is they're adding in support for all of the Grandstream phones and adding more support in for the Grandstream ATAs. So we're in the process of getting those in. At the moment, we've got the Beronet gateways, but we're getting Grandstream in as well. So once that's available, I'll flick everyone around an email with the pricing for those. Call recording, I'll go into here now. So the system does do call recording. Now, that uses a lot of disk space. So if you're deploying on the cloud, you need to make sure that you plan your deployment carefully and that you consider the storage costs for cloud recording. So the best way to calculate all of that is if you use the Google Compute Platform calculator and you go up to here. This way you can calculate your pricing and work out how much it's going to cost to store the data on the cloud and how long you want to have your retention period for your recording. So if I'm doing call recording, probably cheaper to do it on-prem. You can talk to us about JBOD storage as well. So if you need a lot of storage, then we can price something up to suit. We do have some 3CX servers starting at around $1,999. That includes a 1.2 terabyte SSD in them. If you're interested in that, let me know. We do have some 3CX certified models that will work with Breeze Connect and 3CX that can meet sort of more complex call recording requirements. The standard options in here, obviously your call logs and reporting, okay? So if you've got a sales team that need to know how many calls each person made every day, or if they are performing, how long they're on the phone for, etc., you can add scheduled reporting in here. So if you want to send off a report to, the management team or the director, you can have a list in here for all the unanswered and answered calls, how long the person was on the phone, and it'll produce a PDF or a HTML file, and that'll come through via email. So basically, we've covered most things, okay? The other thing that people ask a lot about is contacts. So adding contacts into the global address list so that they're accessible on the app or on the phone. Again, you can import them here, okay? The template for importing those is available via the 3CX website so that you can make sure that all your fields line up. The other option is you can do an Office 365 integration. I've had a few customers with some issues integrating with 365 with the contacts, particularly surrounding the public folders. So if you get stuck with that, please reach out to me and I can contact 3CX and get some assistance that way. Connecting CDR software from Grant. Grant, is that to do your call reporting and costing? Is that what you were planning on doing? Okay, cool. So the CDR software in here, if you go to the CDR tab here, you can generate CDR files for 3CX. So you can have a single file for all your calls, separate files for each call, okay? And you can go through and do it that way, all right? All of the fields that you create are are in here. So if you wanted to put in the caller ID, okay, all of these like either dynamic length or static length, okay. So this obviously needs some tweaking if you're going to be doing call reporting or billing, okay, and you need to feed it into a billing system. There are some systems, Tell-Us and a few other call reporting platforms. Generally, you may not need to generate CDRs, only if you're going to be feeding into your own billing platform. So I'm figuring Grant might be rebilling things out or whatnot that he might need to do it. I do believe there is an API available. I can follow that up after the call. Okay, cool. Yeah, good question, Joe. So Joe's asked about the minimum requirements for 3CX on the cloud platform. So 3CX on Google Cloud, I had a few customers picking the micro and the small instances. They don't work. They have call quality issues. Because they've only got one CPU, they can be a bit nasty if the web service locks up or the system's generating reports or backing up. It will come at the cost of call quality. I typically recommend going for the N1 Standard 2, okay, with a 2 CPU system. Obviously, the higher specs you go, okay, the more it's going to cost. So if you go onto a 2 CPU system, you add in, for instance, here, I'll put one instance for 3CX, okay, and I'll go the Australia region. I won't add any disks in yet. I'll just give you a rough idea on the compute cost. You'll see here that it's $68 a month. You do get a 30% discount because you're running the system 24 hours a day. That's the sustained usage discount. So Azure are doing that now too. They're doing a discount based upon reserved instances. So if you're running it on Azure, you do get the same discount. If you are deploying this to sell to your customers, maybe a big system that you're going to put lots of tenants on or whatnot, spin it up on Azure and use your Microsoft partner credits. So if you've got Action Pack, use your Azure credits towards the cloud hosting as opposed to paying Google. Azure's not a supported platform yet that can be deployed via the PBX Express tool. However, you can deploy it manually. So if you search here for deploying on Azure on 3CX Linux manual install, okay, it'll come up with how to go about it. If you get stuck, I can help you do it. So I've successfully deployed it on Azure with no problems. 3CX have told me that they don't have any problem with it working. The only limitation to them is the PBX Express tool uses OpenStack to deploy, and obviously that doesn't work on Azure. So that's why that tool doesn't work yet. But no, absolutely no reason why you can't deploy on Azure, okay? And the same rule applies in terms of the system specs. Don't underdo it, otherwise you'll end up with problems. Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up, or anything you want me to show you? No other questions? So what I'll do, guys, I'll flick out my direct details after the webinar. So if you've got any opportunities you need help with, or you're not quite sure on deployment, okay, you can reach out to me. Grant, yeah, for lunch breaks, if you go back into the 3CX console, you'll see under settings and then under office time zone and holidays, there are break times that you can configure in there that would be applicable for lunch or breakfast break, or a smoko break, depending on what industry you're in. So you just click on configure here and you select your break times in there, and that will set up the out of office message during business hours so that you can implement that functionality. Well, yeah, thanks guys for joining today. I know it's a little bit hectic running through everything, but hopefully I've answered some of the questions you've got about getting the finer tuning done in 3CX. I'll flick out my details after the webinar, so please feel free to reach out if you need any more support. TeamViewer is available via the Breeze Connect website for quick support. If you download that with your ID number and give me a call, I'm always happy to jump in and help you get it set up. So thanks everyone today, and I'll reach out to you soon.